Hi guys, welcome back to TOEFL with Juva. Today I will answer a question for task 3 in TOEFL speaking that you can find in the ETS practice test. First, I'm going to tell you what task 3 is about, then I will answer the question, and after that I will show you what you need to do to get a high score. Let's get started. What is task 3 about? Task 3 is called general to specific. First, you have to read an academic text. The passage explains an abstract concept or a theory. After that, you listen to a lecture. The lecturer elaborates on this concept or theory by providing concrete details. Your task is to summarize both passages and to combine the information from both. You have 30 seconds to prepare your answer and 60 seconds to speak. That's not much time. When I took my TOEFL speaking test, I found this task quite stressful. But I managed to deliver a great answer in that short time frame because I used my TOEFL speaking template. I say this a lot and I will say it again. Use a speaking template. It's a lifesaver. The great thing about TOEFL speaking is that the task is always the same. And this means that you can prepare for the task before you take the TOEFL by using a speaking template. A template gives you sentence starters to memorize. These sentence starters use linking words and a broad range of vocabulary, and this will boost your TOEFL speaking score. If you need a template for TOEFL speaking, click on the link in the description. You can get your templates for all TOEFL speaking tasks, tasks 1, 2, 3, and 4 there. Let's have a look at task 3 in the ETS practice test. You can find a link to this test in the description below. What is the task about? The passage talks about flow and defines the concept. The lecturer provides an example for flow. He talks about his friend, a former physics professor who had spent an entire night working on a mathematics puzzle because he found it so interesting. The task asks you to explain flow and how the example used by the professor illustrates the concept. I'm now going to give my answer to this question, exactly as I would do it in the TOEFL. By the way, you can access a sheet with my answer and with tips on how to get a high TOEFL speaking score by clicking on the link in the description below. I'm going to talk a bit faster because this is how I would do it in the TOEFL. Let's go! The article discusses flow and defines it as the feeling of total focus on a mentally or physically demanding activity for its own sake, accompanied by a sense of timelessness and a high level of enjoyment. The lecturer provides an example for flow. He states that he once met a former physics professor in the morning after that professor had been working on a mathematics puzzle in a classroom for an entire night. He had wrinkled clothes and looked very tired, but was extremely happy. He had been so focused on solving the puzzle all night without caring about eating or sleeping and had totally forgotten about time. Interestingly, the puzzle had nothing to do with his work. He had found it in a mathematics journal and it had simply fascinated him. Consequently, based on the information in both passages, the physics professor had experienced flow by solving the puzzle for its own sake, which was so satisfactory that it made him forget about time. I'm now going to show you how you can get a high score in TOEFL speaking. Let's have a closer look at my answer, starting with the structure I used. I started with the topic of the article, which is the concept of flow. And I defined this concept. That's what the question asks you to do. It says, explain flow. Then I went on with the speaker's topic. I said that the lecturer provides an example for flow. After that, I explained the example. In the end, I drew a conclusion by combining the information from both passages. I said that the physics professor experienced flow. This way, I explain how the example used by the professor illustrates the concept of flow. And that's exactly what the question asks you to do. I didn't have to think about the structure. I already had the structure in my head because I memorized my TOEFL speaking template before. I knew that I would start my answer with the article discusses flow and defines it as, and so on. This made it easier for me to give my answer. Let's have a look at the vocabulary I used. I paraphrased the information given whenever this was possible. Paraphrasing means using different words than those given in the article and in the lecture. If you paraphrase, you show TOEFL that you have a broad range of vocabulary, and this will improve your TOEFL speaking score. For instance, the article uses the words a feeling of great satisfaction, but I said a high level of enjoyment. Or instead of lose their sense of time, I used forget about time. These are just a few examples of how you can paraphrase in TOEFL speaking. Of course, you shouldn't paraphrase when it's not possible to do so. You must show TOEFL that you know which words can be paraphrased and which cannot, because this will get you a higher score. For instance, I used the words flow, time, and physics professor that were given in the article and in the lecture. That's totally fine. Let's check out the last point, grammar. You should use more complex grammar in your answer because this way you show the TOEFL examiners that you have great language skills. That's how to raise your TOEFL speaking score. For example, I said that the physics professor had been working on a mathematics puzzle and that he had totally forgotten about time. I used a complex past tense to showcase my grammar. This way I demonstrated that I know how to do this, which would improve my TOEFL speaking score. That's it. That's how you answer Task 3 in TOEFL speaking. I hope this video was helpful to you guys. If you have any questions or a video wish, comment below and I would love to see you here next time. Bye bye.